To sort of push back against the implied thing that you said. So
Sure.
when saying Biden is the worst president
No, second worst in modern history. That's what I said. Second
in
worst.
modern history, who's the worst?
W, with no question.
I see, because of the horrible wars, probably.
I mean, Iraq is just so bad.
It's just a mess. Yeah.
One of my favorite authors is a guy, Gene Edward Smith. He's written a bunch of presidential biographies. And in the opening of his W biography, he's like, there's just no question. There's a single worst foreign policy mistake in all of American history. And W is one of our worst presidents ever. He had terrible judgment and got us into a war of his own choosing. It was a disaster, and it set us up for failure. By the way, we talked a lot about Donald Trump. Nobody is more responsible for the rise of Donald Trump than George W. Bush, but I could go off on Bush for a long time.
Oh, we will.
Yeah,
We will return there. So as part of the pushback, I'd like to say, because I agree with your criticism of arrogance and narcissism against Joe Biden, the same could be said about Donald Trump.
You're absolutely
of
right.
arrogance.
Yes.
So, and I think you've also articulated that a lot of presidents throughout American history have suffered from a bad case of arrogance and narcissism.
Absolutely, but it's sometimes for a benefit. You know, you have to be a pretty crazy person to be to want to be president. I had put out a tweet that got some controversy, and I think it was Joe Rogan, who I love, but he was like, I want to find out who Kamala Harris is as a human being. Yeah. And I was like, I'm actually not interested in who politicians are as human beings at all. I was like, I've read too much about them to know. I know who you are. If you spend your life, and because I live in Washington and I spend a lot of time around would-be politicians, I know what it takes to actually become the president. It's crazy. You have to give up everything, every night. You're not spending it with your wife. You're spending it at dinner with potential donors, with friends, with people who can connect you. Even after you get elected, that's even more so. Now you got to raise money, and now you're on to the next thing. Now you want to get your political thing through. You're going to spend all your time on your phone. You and your staff are going to be more like this. Your entire life revolves around your career. It's honestly, you need an insane level of narcissism to do it, because you have to believe that you are better than everybody else, which is already pretty crazy. And not only that, your own personal characteristics and foibles lead you to the pursuit of this office and to the pursuit of the idolatry of the self and everything around you. There's a famous story of Lady Bird Johnson after Johnson becomes the president. He's talking to the White House butler, and she was like, everything in this house revolves around my husband. Whatever's left goes to the girls, her 2 children, and I'll take the scraps. So everything revolved around Johnson's political career. And his daughters, when they're honest, because they like to paper over some of the things that happened under him, but they didn't spend any time with him. Saturday morning was for breakfast with, Richard Russell, I forget. These are all in the Robert A. Caro books. Sunday was for Rayburn. There was no time for his kids. That's what it was. And by the way, he's one of the greatest politicians to ever live. But he also died from a massive heart attack, and he was a deeply sad and depressed individual.
Yeah, I saw that tweet, to go back to that.
Yeah.
And also, I listened to your incredible debate about it with Marshall on the Realignment podcast, and I have to side with Marshall. I think you're just wrong on this.
All right.
Because I think revealing the character of a person is really important to understand how they will act in a room full of generals and full of...
this gets to the judgment question.
The judgment.
And I think of Johnson and of Nixon, of Teddy Roosevelt, even of FDR. I can give you a laundry list of personal problems that all those people had. I think they had really, really good judgment. And I'm not sure how intrinsic their own personal character was to their exploration and thinking about the world. So JFK might be our best example, because he had the best judgment out of anybody in the room as a brand new president in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he got us out and avoided nuclear war, which he deserves eternal credit for that. But how did he arrive to good judgment? Some of it certainly was his character, and we can go again, though, into his laundry list of that. But most of it was around being with his father, seeing some of the mistakes that he would make. And he was also had a deeply inquisitive mind, and he experienced World War II at the personal level after PT 109. So it is, look, I get it. I actually could steel man it. The response to what I'm saying is judgment is not divisible from personal character, but just because I know a lot of politicians and I've read enough with the really great ones, the people who I revere the most, there's really bad personal stuff basically every single time.
But you're saying the judgment was good.
Yeah, his judgment was great.
On the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
Some of the best judgment and decision-making in the history of America.
Yes, and we should study a lot of it. And I encourage people, out there. This is a brutal text. We were forced to read it in graduate school. The Essence of Decision by Graham Allison. I'm so thankful we did. It's one of the foundations of political science because it lays out theories of how government works. This is also a useful transition, by the way, if we want to talk about Trump and some of his cabinet and how that is shaping up, because people really need to understand Washington. Washington is a creature with traditions, with institutions that don't care about you. They don't even really care about the president. They have self-perpetuating mechanisms which have been done a certain way, and it usually takes a great shocking event like World War II to change really anything beyond the marginal. Every once in a while, you have a figure like Teddy Roosevelt who's actually able to take peacetime presidency and transform the country, but it needs an extraordinary individual to get something like that done. So the question around the essence of decision was the theory behind the Cuban Missile Crisis of how Kennedy arrived at his decision. And there are various different schools of thought, but one of the things I love about the book is it presents a case for all three: the organizational theory, the bureaucratic politics theory, and then kind of the great man theory as well. So there's you and I could sit here and I could tell you a case about PT 109 and about how John F. Kennedy experienced World War II as this, I think he was like a first lieutenant or something like that, and how he literally swam miles with a wounded man's life jacket strap in his teeth with a broken back, and he saved him, and he ended up on the cover of Life magazine, and he was a war hero. And he was a deeply smart individual who wrote a book in 1939 called Why England Slept, which to this day is considered a text which at the moment was able to describe in detail why Neville Chamberlain and the British political system arrived at the policy of appeasement. I actually have a original copy. It's one of my most prized possessions because and from 1939, because this is a 23-year-old kid. Who the fuck are you, John F. Kennedy? Turns out he's a brilliant man. And another just favorite aside is that at the Potsdam Conference, where Harry Truman is there with Stalin and everybody. So in the room at the same time, Harry S. Truman, President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, the general, right, who will succeed him, 26-year-old John F. Kennedy as a journalist, some shithead journalist on the side. And all three of those presidents were in the same room with Joseph Stalin and others. And that's the story of America right there. It's kind of amazing. I love people to say that because you never know about who will end up rising to power. But
are you announcing that you're running for
president? No, absolutely not. Yeah. I don't have what it takes. I don't think so. I'm self-aware. Yeah.
Well, maybe humility is necessary for greatness.